This is my honest take on Evoker. Yes, I know there is currently a really weird situation on the forum and on Reddit, and people complain a lot about it for whatever reason. So this is my take on it and my honest opinion. Please let me know yours in the comments down below. As always, special shout out to all my dear supporters that help me keep the lights on. And now without much further ado, let's jump straight in. And let me tell you that, yes, it was literally broken when it came out. Like absolutely, like literally. And you could not have the familiar out and stuff, but they fixed it in the second part of the beta. And I personally think the Evoker, just from a perspective how it feels, is very close to Core Elementalist. That much people would agree to that. You have an F5 button, it feels very close to Core Elementalist because you have no overloads, you have no additional attacks on the weapons. It's really like your utility skills are quite easy to understand. It's really straightforward. The only thing that changes, so to say, is your familiar. So your pet that you have, that is not really a pet, but still, and it gives you an attack, and it gives you, after 3 times you use this attack, you can then use another empowered attack. And only the empowered attack has a cast time. The other attacks don't have a cast time, but you only have 1 familiar. And that's already a thing that is like, yeah, we have to talk about it, is that you specialize in 1 familiar. And this means you specialize in a specific element, yeah? But you could specialize in, so to say, for example, air, and really only use it for the familiar skill. Or you could only use it to get the passive of it. What is the passive? The passive means that you can that the familiar that you chose, so for example the air here, will reset the cooldown of the element of air in this case to 1 second. Whenever you swap out of air, it will be 1 second to go back in. So this is obviously really strong. That means that you can, like for example, go into earth every second. So you could go fire earth, water earth, air earth, because this is like a very short cooldown. This is very strong, and sometimes you could actually choose a familiar that you actually don't like the attack of, but you just want to have this passive effect from getting this very fast. And that's a little bit like, it has really good potential in theory crafting. I like this design a lot, but people don't like this like role playing, and it feels also a little bit weird sometimes to have some like evoked pet that you never use, or not for the main like reason. And that's obviously not something that all the people like. But let's talk a little bit more about the utility skills. I think the utility skills are a little bit boring. I think the healing skill is fine, the elite skill is really fun, but the normal utility skills seem a little bit bad. Not necessarily bad to use in situations. They are nice DPS increases, they all can be a stun drag, they can be decent in PvP and World vs. World, every single one of them. But I would say they feel a little bit boring. They are not too exciting to use. And they are really getting a lot of their value if you have the familiar of the specific type. So you would typically not run the earth utility skill if you didn't have the taunt equipped. And that's a little bit, I feel that feels a little bit sad. It's a similar problem to Conduit with the other legends, with the resonant effects. But I think personally they can easily fix it and just give it a little bit more love and make it so that you can also use it and it's useful to use if you're not like having the familiar of the specific element. In general, I also think that the numbers obviously are absolutely broken currently. It's the highest DPS numbers in the entire game, and they will definitely fix that. That's not like a big reason to say the spec is broken or bad. I think it's the numbers, that's why a beta is there. They will change the numbers depending on how it performed in the beta, and it will still be very good, don't worry. It will not be as broken at the release, I would say, but definitely fun to play. And just talk a bit about the numbers. You can play a quickness evoker that reaches over 50k DPS, 51k as far as I know. Power quickness evoker, really strong. If you play a power DPS evoker, you can even reach 59k DPS. Yes, that is very high, but I think they will definitely decrease the number, and it will definitely be still a very good spec. Don't forget, this is not using the specialized elements trait so that you use all fire skills or only air skills or something. Those builds that I just mentioned typically swap through elements and get value from them. We will get to that in a specific section. Be sure to skip ahead if you only want to hear my thoughts on this. But I personally think that that is a very big topic that we have to cover as well. Then you have a full Condi DPS evoker, which is currently the highest benchmark in the game. It reaches almost 61k DPS and with pistol dagger, and it's really, really strong. Again, it's not using the specialized elements trait because you really want to swap. And then you have the, so to say, fire only Evoker, where you use the specialized elements trait, where you camp on scepter focus all the time, and this is a really high benchmark. So you can see it here in the background. I'm just spamming buttons. It's really easy. I don't have to like concentrate that much, reaching 45k. If you follow a correct rotation, you reach 55k and have the correct gear and everything equipped. So it's really, really strong. So I say this is some kind of low intensity build if you don't mind high APM, but you see all your cooldowns, you just press all the buttons of cooldown, you don't have to follow rotation, reach 45k. Yeah, looks pretty good. Probably will get nerfed, but I think this build will still exist. It will still function as this build. Probably not with that number, but it will still be completely fine to use after expansion release, I would say. Because that's what people ask for. A fire-only elementalist that is really strong. Yeah, that's what you get, Fire Wizard after all. Regarding the healing of Evoker, you can play actually Alacrity heal support. That works. Yes, you can provide permanent Alacrity. You can play a full healer set like for Tempest or even like for Catalyst, exactly the same setup. I personally run Staff, as you can see in the background, and I could outlast the extremely damaging field here on the Golem with not too much of an effort. It was at some point a little bit stressful, but it was doable. And you can see if you have the correct setup, you actually can upkeep, of course, Alacrity, you can upkeep Regeneration, you can upkeep Swiftness, you can upkeep Protection barely, but you can do it. And you can actually get some nice stability output as well. You don't have any access to H's, you're lacking Vigor, you're lacking other good wounds that you might want to have sometimes, like Resistance, but you can upkeep, and that's the interesting part, Fury and Might as well. You can't stack up 25 Might instantly, but after a while you can get that if you are running the Midnight King relic, which is obviously a really weird thing to do on a support build, but it works to some extent. So I think this build should get some more boons in the traits so that they actually can make that work as a healer as well, because I think that should exist, some kind of Alacrity healing Evoker. But right now I feel like it's just outclassed by the other specs, so you would probably never run it if you're not like in love with the familiar, I guess. But that's just my take on the healing here. I personally had fun on it, but I think it needs a little bit of help at least. And never run it with the specialized one, keep that in mind. And now let's talk about the specialized elements trait. So in PvE, I would say it is really hard to justify specializing in a single element that is not fire. Why is that? So the Earth one gives you a lot of defenses, but who cares? You do no damage, you have no healing. It's just like you would never play this in PvE. The same goes for Air. Air skills have typically low cooldown and are CC focused. So sometimes you have some damaging skills that have low cooldown, and you get almost no value from resetting their cooldown all the time because they have short cooldown anyway. So spamming them and having CC in there and not having damage or healing is also bad. So you can see this pattern that Elementalist really needs all attunements to function as the spec. Water could work, I tested it. You could make a healer that focuses in water and specializes in it, and you can only use your water staff skills, for example. With a little bit of stress, you can outheal the extremely damaging Golem field, just camping water attunement, as you can see here. But it obviously will never be used in PvE as a healer because you can't apply Alacrity or something. Yeah, so you have this trait is competing against the Alacrity trait, so you would never use it, just straight up. In competitive modes, we will get to it in a minute, but I personally think even there it's hard to justify running a fully water attuned Evoker. And then we have, of course, fully fire attuned Evoker. That one makes more sense because fire has high damage output, and if you're playing a DPS build, you don't care too much about the other elements. And just saying I get more cooldown reduction, so to say, on my fire attunements, that's good enough. So I think that's the only one that makes sense right now. And I also tried it as a solo build, and it works surprisingly well as well. I think it's better if you don't specialize, if you're playing a solo build, like for open world or for tryharding and like hard content, like bounties and stuff. And it has surprisingly high damage, really good healing output. You can see it here. I outlasted the damaging field really easily while doing crazy damage as well. So really strong. How good this is as a solo build. I did not expect it, to be honest, having such a good solo build for Evoker, but it is, and it's really fun in my opinion as well. So I personally would say in PvE, Evoker has decent build crafting elements in there, and it's decently fun, definitely. So I personally don't understand why people complain too much about Evoker in PvE. Yes, the numbers are high, but that's like something they can change. I personally like Evoker. I think it's really fun. But now let's talk about competitive modes. That's where I would say my honest take is a little bit less positive. Why is that? Because Evoker in competitive modes, like I said, the specialized elements trait is like complete garbage. It is not useful even if you specialize in full water, where you would say this is probably the most reasonable thing because you are healer. Competitive modes, you don't care about wounds too much. If you can heal very well and survive, that's good enough. But the problem comes with the second part that I mentioned here. You have to survive. And if you specialize in water, you have almost no defenses. You have just sustain. And if you get focused by some kind of power spike or even a condi spike, and you can't get rid of that in a first second or so, something, you have no defensive, you have no invulnerability. Yes, you could run Mist Form and you can run Teleport, Lightning Flash, but it doesn't like save you most of the time. I played it here once in this PvP match, as you can see, and surprisingly we won, but I can tell you it's probably not because of my build. It was more like that Boys and the other two good people in my team actually carried this build, and me. So I personally would say this is like, you can try it, it is some kind of meme healer, and it has good healing, but it's like in competitive modes, if you fight against smart players, which you typically do to some extent, then they will just focus you and you will die in seconds, even with a lot of healing. So it's like, it feels like you just like cut your 2 arms off and you just play with your legs and say, it's definitely fine. Something like that. It's like you really like decrease your efficiency on an elementalist by saying, I'm locking myself into one element. And maybe in a Circ you could run this as well to be a full healer, but as again in Circs, it helps a lot if you have boons, if you can provide some kind of value other than just healing and cleanses. And I feel like that's a little bit like lacking. So I'm not sure. They should buff this specialized elements trait a little bit in competitive modes at least, and in PvE also make it a little bit more interesting, because it really feels like it's Fire Wizard in PvE and that's it. All the others don't use it. And in competitive modes, Evoker, so let's talk about it, how you can play it. I think in a Circ, it's surprisingly close to Core Elementalist as a DPS. It doesn't really have that much like differences there. It provides some value, damage and stuff like that. You could also play it a little bit of a support, watery focused spec, but I would say it's worse. It's straight up worse than Heal Catalyst or even Healing Tempest in my opinion. I really don't see this being like the most like effective way of a support, because the boon output is bad in general, and I don't know, I think it doesn't feel that great. And I would say it's a DPS build in World vs. World, and that's okay. As a roamer I can see it work, because in PvP you actually have multiple builds that you can play. I would say you can play it as some kind of fresh air elementalist without fresh air, because you can just specialize in the air here and you get fresh air, so to say, for free. And this works very well because the air does a lot of damage and it's fun to play, and you can play with Scepter, you can play with even with Spear if you wanted to. It's really strong and fun to play as well. I played as some kind of really tanky pot specialized Evoker, and this is really annoying. I played some Dagger and I had like insane like outlasting potential on like 1-on-1s and stuff. It's like the absolute disgusting, annoying side-noting build that just bunkers it down and is almost unkillable, because you have so much CC, you have so much like just protection uptime, you have the trait that gives you immunity against critical hits almost permanently up because you swap to Earth that often. It's fun to play, but it's really annoying to fight against it. And I would say they have to take a look at this so that it's not like meta, because you don't want to have a spec that is just very annoying and tanky to fight. If that's like somewhat balanced, I think that would be a fun, cool interaction to have a Bruiser Elementalist on the side note. I think that's interesting. And you could easily run it with some kind of aggressive version as well. So I personally think it has definitely some flexibility there. Again, I would see it not as a support, more as a full DPS roamer or a side-noting Bruiser. That's where I see it, and it's definitely not as busted as it is in PvE, but definitely quite fun to play as well. You could see it in the weekly AT. A lot of people played some kind of aggressive Evoker, and it's really strong because of the air here and just the general like DPS that it puts out. But I think if they nerf the numbers a bit down, I'm not sure if this build is really being played over other Elementalist builds and other builds that you could play in PvP, other classes. So I think Evoker maybe needs some help with the specialized Elements trait. That's definitely a given in my opinion, that the specialized Elements trait is not good enough in all game modes for the most part. It needs some kind of look at it. I also think that some of the numbers are obviously way too high. You have to nerf it in all game modes again. but I personally think that the Evoker actually feels quite fun. I like the spec. It might not be the best spec for all players, but that's not what they aimed for. They aimed for a spec that is interesting, and some people will like it that played Elementalists, some will not. I think they perfectly found a good spot there, that it's interesting. I personally like it. It's fun to play. I like the familiar skills. They're actually quite interesting for the most part. Yeah, what can I say? I think Evoker is not like best of the best, but it's definitely a decent spec, and I think it has some issues that I just mentioned, but in general I think they can be fixed, so I'm looking positively ahead, I would say. So let me know your takes in the comments down below, if you see it like me or if you have some other takes. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. Be sure to check out this playlist if you want to see all my other better elite specs reviews. Thanks again to all my supporters, and I hope to see you all in the next video.